The palace of the Zyari people was built to inspire awe. From the outside, it looked like a mountain carved from glass, towering above the city below. Its spires pierced the clouds, glowing faintly under the alien sun. The people, said the palace, itself was alive, that it hummed with ancient energy that had protected their royal line for 1,000 years. For most, stepping inside was a dream. For outsiders, it was nearly impossible. No human had ever stood inside those walls until today. The great hall stretched endlessly, polished floors reflecting the shifting colors of crystal lanterns. Pillars of silver rose like trees, carved with markings older than any empire. Alien nobles filled the room, dressed in flowing robes that shimmered with the light. They whispered among themselves in soft voices, their words carrying sharp edges. When the soldier entered, their eyes, some glowing, some unblinking, turned on him as though a shadow had dared to walk into the sun at the far end. On a throne of crystal and light sat the princess. Her presence commanded the hall more than the palace itself. She was young by her people's standards, but her crown of silver branches and her gown woven from starlight gave her the aura of someone untouchable. To the Zyari, she was not just royalty, she was divine. And then her gaze fell upon the human. He was not what she expected. He wore no shimmering armor, no ceremonial robes. His uniform was plain, worn from battle, its fabric torn in places. His boots carried the dust of 100 roads. A scar crossed his cheek, faint but unhidden. He stood tall, not stiff like a servant, but steady like a soldier who had long ago stopped fearing death. His dark eyes did not wander over the palace. They met hers directly. For the first time in her life, the princess felt herself pause. Her people had taught her that humans were fragile things, desperate wanderers from a forgotten world. They had no great empire, no noble bloodlines. They were considered reckless, quick to fight, quick to burn, living short lives filled with noise. She had never seen one in person, only in halas and reports, but now one stood in her hall, uninvited, and he did not cower. The nobles whispered louder. What is this creature doing here? Why was he allowed past the gates? An insult to the crown. The princess lifted her hand, and silence swept the chamber. Her heart beat strangely fast, though her face remained calm. She wanted to know why this human had come. But more than that, she wanted to know why she felt unsettled simply by his presence. The soldier did not bow. He did not kneel. Instead, he placed his hands behind his back, as if standing before an officer, and spoke. I bring news, he said, his voice low but clear, carrying across the grand hall. The enemy fleets have moved closer. Your council's predictions are wrong. If you do not prepare now, your world will burn. The princess blinked. The words were bold, too bold for anyone to speak in her court. Usually, messages came softened, polished with respectful phrases. Yet this human gave her nothing but the raw truth. It angered her. It intrigued her. She leaned forward, her silver crown glinting in the crystal light. You dare walk into my hall unannounced, she said, her tone sharp as a blade, and speak of doom before my people. Do you not know who I am? The soldier's gaze did not waver. He answered slowly, each word weighed. I know who you are, but titles do not matter when the galaxy is burning. The nobles erupted in gasps. Some even rose from their seats in outrage. But the princess, she remained still, though inside, her thoughts clashed like thunder. Never before had anyone spoken to her this way. Never before had she felt her pride tested by a single human word. And never before had she been caught off guard not by a threat, not by a weapon, but by a pair of weary human eyes that saw her not as royalty, not as divine, but simply as another soul standing against the storm. And in that silence, the princess realized something dangerous. This meeting was not the end of a story. It was the beginning. The hall remained heavy with silence after the soldier's words. The nobles still muttered among themselves, scandalized that a human had spoken so boldly before their princess. Yet none dared to interrupt her. All eyes rested on the throne, waiting for her reaction. The princess's face was calm, but inside her thoughts twisted in confusion. She had been raised to believe humans were crude, desperate beings who survived only through stubbornness. They were wanderers with no empire, no ancient traditions, no noble blood. Her tutors had told her that humans bowed quickly because they needed protection. But the man standing in her hall did not bow. He stood as if the weight of her crown meant nothing to him. She felt heat rise in her chest, not fear, but something else she had never known. Was it anger? Was it curiosity? She hated not knowing. "You speak," she finally said, her voice like the ring of crystal. "As though you know more than my council, more than my generals, more than those who have served the crown for lifetimes." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You are a soldier, a wanderer, nothing more. Why should I trust your words?" The soldier's expression did not change. He did not flinch, did not defend his pride. He only looked at her with those tired eyes that seemed to carry years of battle. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost too quiet for such a grand room, yet it reached her clearly, "Because I have seen what they do to worlds before they fall, and I have seen what happens to leaders who wait too long to believe." A ripple moved through the nobles. Some hissed, some whispered furiously, their pride wounded by the human's warning. But the princess did not silence him this time. Instead, she held his gaze, caught in the weight of his words. For the first time in her life, she felt small. She quickly pushed the feeling away, sitting straighter on her throne. "You speak of fire and death, as though the stars themselves obey you," she said, her voice sharp again. "But perhaps this is the way of humans to exaggerate danger, to see shadows in the light. You live short lives. You fear what you do not understand." At this, the soldier finally moved. His jaw tightened slightly, his shoulders rising as though the air had grown heavier. He let the silence stretch before answering. "You are right," he admitted. "Humans fear many things. We fear loss. We fear silence. We fear the dark between the stars. But fear makes us act. Fear makes us prepare. That is why we are still here." The hall grew colder. His words struck like a blade not of steel, but of truth. The princess felt her pride wounded, though she would never show it. She clenched her hand around the arm of her throne, her silver rings pressing into her skin. "Bold words," she said, her tone soft now, almost dangerous. "But boldness does not make you right. Tell me, human, what gives you the right to walk into my hall, to speak as though you are my equal?" The soldier did not hesitate. "Because the fire that will burn your world does not care for titles. It will not kneel before your crown." The princess's breath caught. For a moment, she forgot the nobles, the guards, the weight of tradition, pressing on her shoulders. All she could see was this man, this human, who stood before her without fear, who spoke as if the galaxy itself was his battlefield. She wanted to dismiss him. She wanted to send him away, to prove that no outsider could shake her rule. And yet, something inside her whispered that his words were not lies. That whisper unsettled her more than anything. Finally, she lifted her chin and gave a single command. "Leave us." The nobles hesitated. The guards looked uncertain, but she spoke again, firmer. "Leave." Slowly, the chamber emptied, leaving only the princess and the soldier. The vast hall felt even larger now, the silence stretching like an ocean between them. The princess stood from her throne, her gown flowing like liquid starlight around her. She descended the steps slowly, her eyes never leaving his. When she finally stopped before him, she was close enough to see the small scars on his face, close enough to feel the weight of his presence. "You are strange, human," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "You do not fear me. You do not flatter me. You come into my hall and speak as though I am not royalty but simply a person. The soldier's reply was simple. Because that is what you are. Her breath caught again. For the second time that day, the alien princess felt something she had never known before, being seen not as a throne, not as a title, but as herself. And she did not know whether to be furious or grateful. The great hall was empty now, save for the glowing crystals, the tall silver pillars, the princess, and the human soldier who refused to bow. The silence between them was sharp, almost alive, pressing against both of them like invisible chains. The princess stood tall, her crown catching the light, her long gown moving like water with each step. She was a symbol of her people's pride, raised from birth to embody strength, wisdom, and command. No one dared question her word. No one dared look into her eyes without permission. Yet this man, this human, did both without hesitation. She could not decide if it angered her or fascinated her. You stand here, she said slowly, her voice echoing across the empty chamber, and speak as though the fate of my world depends on your warnings. Do you not see? You are a single man. My people are millions. My fleets are countless. My counsel has guided this empire for centuries. She raised her chin, her silver crown glowing softly. Who are you to stand against all of them? The soldier listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he spoke in that calm, steady tone that unsettled her more than shouting ever could. I am no one, he admitted, a soldier, a survivor. But I have walked on worlds that no longer exist. I have seen cities fall silent, skies burned black. I carry their memory, even when no one else does. That is who I am. The princess felt her chest tighten, though. She kept her face composed. His words painted pictures she had never seen, worlds reduced to ash, voices silenced forever. For a moment, she almost imagined it happening here, in her shining city beneath the palace. But she forced the thought away. You speak of fear and loss, she said, her tone sharp again. But fear cannot rule a people. Fear cannot guide an empire. The soldier's eyes, dark and unblinking, met hers. Fear does not guide us, he said. It drives us. It reminds us that time is short, that we cannot waste it. That is why humans fight when others hesitate. That is why we survive. His words cut deep. For the first time, she felt her authority tremble, not because he defied her throne, but because his truth could not be ignored. She hated it. She hated how a single human voice could make her question what she had been taught since childhood. Her pride surged, desperate to protect itself. Then, perhaps, she said coldly, you humans are nothing but frightened children, running through the stars, desperate to live another day. You mistake desperation for strength. You mistake survival for greatness. Her words were sharp as blades. She expected him to argue, to protest, to break beneath the weight of her insult. But he did not. He only stood there, silent, his expression calm but unreadable, and then, without a single word, he turned his back to her. The sound of his boots echoed softly against the polished floor as he walked away from the throne. Each step felt like thunder in the princess's chest. She had dismissed countless beings before, silenced them with her words, crushed them with her authority. But this silence was different. It was not submission. It was not defeat. It was something else, something heavier. The soldier's silence said, your words do not matter to me. I do not need your approval. I came to warn you, and I have done so. Whether you listen or not is your choice. For the first time in her life, the princess felt powerless. Not because she lacked strength or armies, but because her words, her crown, her authority, all of it had failed to move him. Wait, she almost said, but the word caught in her throat, trapped by pride. She could not call him back. She could not admit, not yet, that she wanted him to stay. The human soldier reached the great doors of the hall. He paused only for a moment, his back still turned. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly. "Titles will not save you," he said. "Only choices will." Then he left. The great doors closed behind him with a heavy sound that seemed to echo inside her heart. The hall was silent once more, but this time the silence did not belong to her. The princess stood alone, her crown feeling heavier than ever, her pride clashing with something new, something she did not yet understand, and though she would never admit it aloud, she realized the truth. For the first time in her life, someone had walked away from her throne, and it hurt. The next morning, the Grand Council gathered in the palace. The hall was filled again, but the air was heavier than before. Advisors in long robes, generals with shining armor, and nobles with jeweled crowns all took their places. They spoke, in proud tones, their words rising like waves. But beneath it all was the whisper of unease. The princess sat high upon her throne, her silver crown gleaming, but her mind was far away. She could still see the human soldier's eyes when he spoke, calm, steady, carrying the weight of truth. She hated that his voice lingered in her thoughts. She hated that she could not dismiss it. One of her generals, a tall figure with armor that glittered like ice, stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said firmly, "the reports are exaggerated. Our fleets hold the border. The enemy cannot strike for months, perhaps years. There is no need to panic." The nobles murmured in agreement. Another advisor spoke, his long robe trailing across the floor. "We must not let fear cloud judgment. We are the Zyari. We have endured for centuries. No human wanderer should disturb our peace with wild warnings." Their words were meant to soothe her. They were meant to remind her of her power, of her empire's strength. And yet, they felt hollow. The princess's fingers tapped against the arm of her throne, her face calm, but inside, a storm was building. The soldier's words came back to her. "Titles will not save you. Only choices will." She wanted to believe her generals. She wanted to believe her council. It was easier. It was safer. But her heart whispered differently. Her heart whispered of the human's scars, his steady voice, the weight of his silence when he walked away. Finally, she raised her hand, silencing the chamber. "And what, if he is right?" she asked. The hall grew quiet. The nobles shifted, uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. The general frowned. "Your Highness, with respect, we cannot let the words of a single outsider change the course of an empire. Humans see war everywhere. They survive by expecting disaster. We are not like them." Her gaze sharpened. "No," she said softly, "we are not like them." Her words unsettled the council. They heard pride in them, but also something else, something they could not name. That evening, when the council dismissed itself, the princess did not return to her private chambers. Instead, she walked the quiet corridors of the palace, her gown trailing behind her, her crown heavy on her head. The crystal lights glowed softly, but to her they felt dimmer than usual. She stopped at a balcony overlooking the city. From here, the towers rose high into the sky, their surfaces shining like rivers of light. Her people moved below, unaware of the danger that might be creeping closer with every passing hour. Children laughed in the streets. Merchants called out their prices. Life was calm, untouched. She wondered how long would it remain so. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. It was her most trusted handmaiden, a quiet figure who had served her since childhood. "Your Highness," the handmaiden said softly, "you seem troubled." The princess looked back at the city, her voice low. "Do you think humans lie?" The handmaiden hesitated. "They lie, yes, as all people do, but they are also known for something else." "And what is that?" the princess asked. "Speaking truth when no one wishes to hear it." The words sank deep. The princess's grip tightened on the balcony rail. She closed her eyes. The image of the soldier rising again in her mind, his steady voice, his unshaken stance, His refusal to kneel, she whispered to herself, almost too quietly for the handmaiden to hear. What if he is right? Far beyond the city, at the edge of the system, enemy ships moved like shadows across the stars, silent, patient, closer with every hour, and though the princess could not yet see them, she felt the faint echo of their coming like thunder on the horizon, a storm waiting to break. For the first time, the crown on her head felt not like a gift, but like a chain. Days passed, but the unease in the palace only grew. The princess tried to bury her doubts beneath meetings, ceremonies, and words of reassurance from her council. Yet no matter how many times they told her the human was wrong, his voice echoed in her mind. Titles will not save you. Only choices will. At night, she found herself restless, staring out from her chambers toward the endless stars. They glittered beautifully, but to her, they no longer felt peaceful. They felt like eyes watching, waiting. Then the day came. It began as a tremor in the ground, so faint that many thought it was nothing. But then the palace walls shook. The air was filled with the sound of distant thunder, and the sky outside the crystal windows grew red. The enemy had arrived. From the balcony, the princess watched in disbelief. The horizon burned with fire. Explosions lit the skies like dying stars. Fleets of dark ships descended through the clouds, their weapons raining destruction upon her people's cities. Towers of light crumbled, streets turned to rubble, and the calm laughter of her people was replaced with screams. Her generals scrambled, shouting orders, trying to rally the fleets. But they had been caught off guard, just as the human soldier had warned. The princess's heart raced. She wanted to command, to speak, but her words froze. The truth struck her harder than any weapon. He had been right. The enemy was faster, closer, stronger than her council had ever believed. Her pride, her certainty, had blinded her. And then, through the chaos, she saw him again. The human soldier was in the courtyard below. No crown, no title, no robes of authority, only a rifle in his hands and determination in his eyes, while her guards rushed to protect the palace walls. He was pulling civilians from the rubble, guiding children through the smoke, shouting commands that made soldiers move with purpose. There was no hesitation in him, no pride to weigh him down. He acted because he must, because others needed him. The princess pressed her hand against the cold crystal railing, her chest tightening. She had thought him reckless. She had thought him desperate. But now she saw something else. He was not driven by fear alone. He was driven by the will to protect, no matter the cost. Inside the palace, her council shouted in panic. Some demanded retreat. Some demanded she flee to safety. Their voices tangled together like a storm, each one clinging to pride and position, but none of them moved like the human. None of them bled for her people the way he did. The princess rose from her throne, her voice clear and sharp, cut through the chaos. Enough, she cried. The chamber fell silent, all eyes turning to her. For a moment, she stood frozen, torn, between the pride of her crown and the truth burning in her chest. Then she spoke words she never imagined she would say. The human was right. Gasps filled the room. Some stared in disbelief, some in outrage. But she did not stop. We are not prepared. We thought ourselves untouchable, but the fire has come to our door. And now we must choose, not as nobles, not as rulers, but as a people who wish to live. Her generals looked uncertain, her advisors pale. But she had no time for their hesitation. Without another word, she turned and left the chamber, her gown flowing behind her, her crown heavy, but no longer enough to silence her doubts. She descended the palace steps, the roar of explosions shaking the ground. And there he was, again, the human soldier, standing among fire and ash, shouting orders, dragging the wounded to safety. He turned as she approached, his face streaked with soot, his uniform torn, his eyes steady. For a long moment, they only looked at one another. This time, she did not speak with pride. Her voice was quiet, almost breaking. "You warned me," she whispered, "and I did not listen." The soldier's reply was calm, the same as always. "You're listening now. That's what matters." Behind them, the city burned. Before them, the enemy closed in, and between them, something new began to form, not trust, yet, not friendship, but a fragile thread of respect. The city was burning. Towers that once gleamed like crystal mountains now collapsed into ash and smoke. The sky, once bright with twin moons, glowed red with fire and falling ships. Screams carried through the streets, mixed with the endless roar of weapons. The princess had seen war in reports and on distant screens, but never with her own eyes. Now, standing in the heart of her city, she felt the heat of the flames, the sting of smoke in her throat, the ground trembling beneath her feet. Pride and tradition had no place here. This was survival, and in the center of it all was the human soldier. He moved through the chaos like a storm, his rifle in his hands, his voice cutting through panic. He pulled a wounded guard to safety, then lifted a crying child into his arms before sending her toward shelter. When soldiers hesitated, confused by the sudden attack, he barked orders, clear and sharp, and they obeyed without question. He fought, like a man who had lived through this 100 times before. The princess followed him, her guards at her side, but she kept her eyes on him. She had never seen courage like this, not from her generals, not from her nobles, not even from her own council. They had power, but he had something different, something stronger. At one moment, the enemy broke through the gates of the lower courtyard. Their machines stormed forward, tall and armored, spitting fire. Her soldiers faltered their formation. Breaking panic spread like wildfire. The princess felt her heart freeze. Her people would scatter, her palace would fall. But the human did not hesitate. He ran to the front, climbed to the broken remains of a wall, and raised a launcher onto his shoulder. The explosion lit the night, tearing through the first machine and sending its burning remains crashing into the others. The sight of it rallied her guards, who shouted in unison and pushed forward once more. The princess could only stare, her chest tightening. Here was a man with no throne, no crown, no legacy, to protect, fighting harder for her people than many of her own lords. When the enemy pressed closer, he dropped his weapon and fought with his hands. He struck with brutal force, unafraid of pain, unafraid of death. Blood marked his uniform, his cheek, his arms. Yet still he stood. The princess felt her throat ache. She had always been taught that humans were reckless, that they rushed into danger because they feared nothing. But now she understood the truth. He was afraid he had to be, yet he acted anyway. That was not recklessness. That was courage. At last, the human spotted her standing on the palace steps. He rushed to her, his face streaked with dirt and blood, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. "You can't stay here," he shouted over the chaos. "This is the front line now. Move your people inside the inner sanctum. Protect the civilians. If the palace falls, you hold them together." The princess's lips parted, but no words came. She had given orders all her life. No one had ever commanded her. Yet now, in this burning night, she found herself nodding. For once, she did not feel like a ruler above him. She felt like a soldier beside him. Together, they moved through the smoke. She gave commands, rallying her guards. He cleared the path, forcing back attackers, guiding survivors to safety. For a moment, the palace halls were no longer walls of crystal and silver. They were trenches, carved by desperation, filled with ash and cries for help. Hours passed like minutes. The battle raged on, and exhaustion weighed heavy on all of them. Yet the human never stopped. Not once. Even when his arm bled, even when his legs trembled, he carried another child, pushed another stone, fought another enemy. The princess watched him with something she could not name. Was it respect? Was it guilt? Or was it something more than feeling she had never allowed herself to know? When the worst of the fighting finally passed, When the enemy retreated to regroup, the courtyard was in ruins. Fires still burned. The wounded lay in rows. Her people wept, and there, in the center, the human soldier leaned against the broken wall, his chest heaving, his rifle still in his grip. His eyes lifted to hers, not proud, not triumphant, only steady. The princess's heart ached at the sight. For the first time in her life, she whispered words she had never spoken to anyone before. "Thank you." The soldier gave a tired nod. Not done yet. And with those words, she understood why humanity had endured against every storm. Because when others broke, humans stood. And when others fled, humans stayed. The fires had dimmed, but the city still smoked. Dawn broke weakly over the ruined towers, casting pale light on the shattered streets. Where once the capital had glittered like crystal under the sun, it now looked like a scar across the land. The people moved slowly through the rubble, carrying the wounded, searching for the lost. The princess walked among them, her crown gone, her gown torn, her hands stained with ash. She had never been so close to her people before, never felt the weight of their eyes without the safety of her throne. They looked at her now not as a divine ruler, but as a woman who had stood among them when the night was longest. For the first time, she felt worthy of their gaze, but her heart was heavy. Everywhere she looked, she saw the cost of pride. Buildings crumbled because she had believed the council instead of the human. Lives were lost because she had hesitated, refusing to trust his warning. Each cry of grief pierced her like a blade, and yet, through the smoke, there he was. The human soldier stood near the ruins of the courtyard, leaning against a cracked wall, his uniform torn and bloodied. His arms were bandaged roughly, his face pale with exhaustion, but his eyes were steady, watching as survivors found safety, as guards rebuilt barricades, as children clung to their families. He looked like a man who had nothing left to give, and yet somehow, she knew he would give more if asked. The princess approached slowly, her guards trailing behind her at a respectful distance. When she stopped before him, he straightened, though his body clearly ached. His gaze met hers without hesitation, as it always had. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer sharp or heavy. It was softer now, filled with unspoken understanding. At last, the princess lowered her head. Her voice trembled, though she fought to steady it. "You warned me," she whispered. "I did not listen. Because of me, my people suffered." The soldier studied her quietly. Then he shook his head. "Because of you, they still have hope. You stayed. You fought beside them. That matters." She looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Hope," she echoed. "How can they hope when the city lies in ruin?" He gave the faintest of smiles, weary but real. "Because they are alive. As long as they live, there is hope. Humans know this better than anyone." The princess's chest tightened. She remembered her tutors calling humans reckless, desperate wanderers. But now she understood the truth. It wasn't recklessness, it was resilience. They carried hope, like fire, even into the darkest nights. She took a slow breath, the words heavy but honest. "All my life, I was told humans were weak, that they lived short lives filled with fear, that they had no empire, no throne, no glory. But today, I saw something no empire could give." Her voice grew stronger, her eyes never leaving his. "I saw courage. I saw strength. I saw humanity." The soldier did not reply immediately. He only watched her, as though weighing her words. Finally, he said, "We don't need thrones. We don't need crowns. All we need is each other. That's enough." The simplicity of his words struck her deeper than any speech. She felt her pride crumble, replaced by something humbler, something truer. She lowered her head once more, not as a ruler bowing to a subject, but as a woman giving respect. "You saved my people," she said softly, "not because you had to, not because you owed us, but because it was right. For that, I will never forget you. For the first time, the soldier looked away, his eyes on the ruined horizon. The war isn't over, he said. More will come. You'll need to be ready. She nodded, determination hardening her heart. Then, I will be ready. And when they come, they will not find a princess who hides behind her throne. They will find a ruler who fights beside her people. The soldier turned back to her, his tired eyes meeting hers once more. For a brief moment, the world fell silent, the smoke, the ruins, the grief, all fading into the background. There was only the human and the princess, two souls from different worlds, bound together by fire and truth. And in that silence, the alien princess finally understood what made humanity different. It was not their strength. It was not their technology. It was the fire inside them, the unyielding will to stand, to endure, to protect, even when the stars themselves seemed to fall. The galaxy would never forget the day she first looked into human eyes and saw hope.